Hi, my name's Sean. I write books and tell stories, and today I'd like to tell you the story about a man called Benjamin Beerenwinkel and how his life is about to take a turn for the worse. It's a story I like to call Besotted. Besotted, Chapter 1. The first time I saw Sally, she was 13. Her family moved in next door. I was washing the car, scrubbing away the dirt that had accumulated after almost 2 weeks of constant rain and shit weather. Finally, the sun had deigned to grace us with its presence. It was a Saturday, and I had time to kill, so it seemed like the ideal opportunity to shine at my motor. Their car pulled onto the driveway. It was one of those hideous people carriers, some French car in a sallow colour, perhaps just a couple of years old. As the passengers got out, I noticed that the females in the family were also of a similarly pallid complexion. There were 3 of them, the mother and, presumably, her 2 daughters. One was perhaps 11 or 12, the other slightly older. They both wore jeans and t-shirts. Their mother wore a dress. The 3 of them walked cheerlessly up to the front door, the mother digging in her handbag for the keys. As they did so, only the eldest girl looked in my direction, her intense eyes locking onto mine before she turned her head. The driver of the car, a man in his late 30s, walked around to the boot and popped it open. He was taller than me, slightly heavier built and clean shaven. His hair was full, neatly trimmed, and I guessed he looked younger than he was. But there was no smile on a face that, I conceded, would be deemed handsome by most women. As I hosed the suds from my car, I wondered about this strange family, none of whom had spoken to me, and only one of whom had even acknowledged, albeit in a defiant, almost confrontational way, my presence. Perhaps, I thought, as I shammied off the water on my car, they were just a shy bunch of people. Maybe they would say hello at some point in the future. I was back inside by the time the removals lorry had turned up, and I watched as the man of the house stood alongside his car, observing the guys lugging the furniture into the house like some overbearing foreman. "Never had you pegged as a nosy, Parker?" I was startled from my solitude. I turned to see my wife Faye standing in the doorway between the kitchen and the front room, drying off her hands. She'd been cooking. I gave her a half smile. "The new neighbours." "I saw a car in the driveway while you were cleaning yours. What are they like?" She came up and stood beside me. "I have no idea," I answered. "They didn't say a word." "Didn't you say anything to them?" It was a valid question, and momentarily I frowned. Then I turned to face Faye. It didn't seem the right time. She grunted and returned to the kitchen. I remained at the window, hands in the pockets of my jogging bottoms. The guy chose that moment to turn in my direction. His eyes met mine with an intensity similar to that of his eldest daughter. For a moment I considered waving, but then he turned away and disappeared into his house. I gave a shrug and then went upstairs to the 4th bedroom, which had been transformed into an office come dumping ground for junk. I have to be honest and say that I find it difficult to work in a dump. But we were in this transitional stage where Faye was clearing out the junk in preparation for moving out. Most of her clothes had already gone, and those that were left were no longer in the bedroom we had shared for more than 5 years, but rather they were in one of the spare rooms. Back at the start, we'd figured that by now, some 5 years down the line, children would be occupying the spare rooms. But that was not to be. I'm not sure if it was that which had caused the bitterness and resentment to creep into our relationship, or whether it was the fact that I was a struggling writer, struggling to write a follow-up to my minor bestseller, and money was, as a consequence, becoming tighter and tighter. I guess it didn't matter anymore. What did matter was that Faye was leaving me, leaving the house, and leaving me with a mortgage. Our 7-year relationship was over. I was in my early 40s, childless, single, and £147,000, or as near as made no difference, in debt to the mortgage company. Oh, and I only had a minor source of income in the rapidly diminishing royalties from the sale of my first book. The last cheque I'd received had been for just £389.27, and that was for 6 months' worth of sales. I had that and the lowly wage I received from the 10 hours a week I worked as a counsellor. I had to write something new. My agent was constantly telling me that. I flicked on the PC, heard it whine painfully as it fired up, and wondered whether I could justify spending my royalties on a new computer, but perhaps even a nice shiny notebook that I could take to the pub with me. I'd been going to the pub a lot recently, usually to escape either from the atmosphere in the house or the emptiness that existed when Faye was out with her new guy. But with Faye leaving, I had some stark choices to make. She'd been paying the mortgage for the last few months, but her imminent departure would also see the withdrawal of those payments. She'd made it clear she didn't want the house. There wasn't much in the way of equity left in it, and she certainly didn't want the hassle of the mortgage repayments. Faye was starting a new life. Where that left me was somewhere between in the lurch and up shit creek. I hadn't made up my mind which of the two it was just yet, but I figured they both amounted to the same conclusion. The house would either have to be sold, or else it would be repossessed. All I had in the way of assets was the 2-year-old Mitsubishi Evo parked on the driveway, and even if I got top dollar selling it, it would support me and pay the mortgage for perhaps 6 months before I'd be in the same position as I was now. And to be honest, what the hell would a single man want a 4-bedroom house for? The monitor flashed into life and Microsoft Word automatically greeted me as the computer revived itself from hibernation. There on the screen was a document, my latest masterpiece. The info in the bottom left of the window telling me I was on page 7 of 7 and I'd written 1,752 words. I'd been working on this particular novel for the last year. At one stage I'd written almost 10,000 words before, in a fit of self-doubt, I trashed the lot. Writers do that sometimes. I shook my head. Call myself a writer after having one mildly successful book published? Hardly. I stared at the screen for a good 10 minutes, trying to figure my way out of this current bout of writer's block. My writing sessions invariably began like this, particularly when I backed my character into a corner that I couldn't get him out of. The next 15 minutes I spent creating a playlist of music on Spotify, supposedly to inspire me. Let music be my muse. But as the music played softly from the speakers of my aged PC, I found myself becoming more distracted. I heard a shout from outside. Tempted by any distraction available, I got to my feet and wandered across to the window, which gave a view of the sizable rear garden my house possessed. It also looked onto part of next door's garden, the grass overgrown after months of neglect, the shed battered and weathered, having thirsted for creosote for many years. The window was slightly ajar, and as I pushed it further open I heard more shouting. "Leave me alone!" It was the voice of a teenage girl. The girl who had practically glared at me as she made her way into the house. "Sally, get inside now." This was her mother, I presumed. She sounded feeble, quiet, as though she didn't want to be heard. She had the voice of a victim, and I subconsciously wondered about the man of the house and what he had done to his family to make them this way. Then I shook my head and gave a smile. This was just my imagination concocting plots. I saw convoluted plots everywhere in everyday life. The couple meeting furtively in a bar were obviously having an affair. The 2 cars parked in a lay-by on a deserted B road belonged to drug dealers cutting a deal. The businessmen holding court in the corner of a club, was organising the murder of a rival. Everywhere a plot. I looked down as Sally came into view. She was short, slim, with medium-length dark brown, almost black hair. Her clothes looked new, expensive even. She plonked herself down on the low wall that led up to a raised portion of the garden towards the rear fence, and she flung her head into her hands. Whatever had upset her, she was making a show of it, as is the wont of most teenagers. "Sally, just come inside, please." Her mother was almost pleading with her. The young girl raised her head out of her hands, and I was certain I saw her mouth a few expletives. Then she looked up at the window where I was standing. For a brief instant I was tempted to back away out of sight, but that would have made it obvious that somebody had been spying on her. Instead, I pretended that I was looking down at my own garden, the neatly cropped lawn, the flower beds, the decking leading up to a water feature surrounded by heavy stones, all of which would belong to somebody else within a matter of weeks. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her lean back on her arms. She was continuing to stare up at the window, almost challenging me to look in her direction. Instead, I stroked my chin thoughtfully, nodded my head as though having come to some decision about my back lawn, and then turned away from the window. Faye was standing in the bedroom doorway. "Spying on the neighbours again? You'll get a reputation." "What do you want?" I asked her with an edge of bitterness as I made my way back to the chair in front of the computer. "I'm going in the shower," she told me, "and then I'm going out. I'm just making sure you don't need the bathroom." We had a main family bathroom and 2 en suites. It made no difference to me which of the 3 she used. To me it just seemed like she was trying to rub my nose in it. I sat back down, putting my back to her, and I shrugged. "I'm sure I'll manage if I do," I said. Within a matter of seconds I heard the hiss from the main bathroom, which was closest to my makeshift study, as a shower was turned on. And then the bathroom door was closed and locked, with a finality that reminded me of the first day she closed and locked her legs on me.